So hello and welcome to the Elder Abuse Training Part 4. If you suspect something, say something. And this is Part 4, having the conversations. And we're going to be talking to Lynn, our social worker, in a bit more depth about her recommendations for how to speak to older people about these difficult topics. So first of all, Lynn, what would you suggest to people to do if they suspect elder abuse?
Well, there's a few points there, obviously. So you may be working with or know an older person where you have noticed signs that things are not right, like unexplained bruising, the person becoming more reserved, and their mood may be lower. They may become scared when a certain family member is visiting, or they may not have food or medication and may stop taking care of their personal hygiene. Many little things may be occurring which make us feel concerned for the older person's home situation. It may be easy to start doubting yourself and thinking, well, it's not my business to get involved, or if I say something, things might get worse for that person. Instead, remember that it's okay to trust your instincts and ask the person if they are okay. It's also okay to get it wrong, because what you are doing is checking in with them, letting them know that you've noticed that they don't seem their usual selves, or that you've noticed a few bruises that look worrying to you. When you come from a place of genuine concern for someone else's well-being, you build trust and rapport. So even if the individual does not open up on this occasion, you have let them know that someone is there for them.
So how would you actually have the conversation though? So are there steps that you want to talk us through?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's quite a few things to really think about and take into consideration when you're starting to talk to somebody about your concerns, about what you might be seeing, and things that might not be adding up for you, that raise that sort of worry feeling in you. And I think that's something that we need to talk about, and how to trust that, because they're not easy conversations to have. These conversations with people, about anything that sort of, might sort of open up something that you might not be ready for. So here's a few things that you can sort of look at doing. Okay, so you may want to consider where you speak to the person. They may be in the home with the person who is causing them harm. You can suggest going out for a cuppa or a drive. Take into consideration the safety of the person you are speaking to, as well as your personal safety. Ask questions that are open-ended. For example, I have noticed several bruises on your arms, which are worrying to me. Can you tell me about how you got them? The last few times that I have come to see you, you haven't been your usual self. Is there a reason for this? So questions that are open-ended just allows the person to talk more about what's happening for them. It doesn't close off the conversation, and lets them to talk freely without the yes and no sort of answers at the end of it that might close off a conversation. Irrespective of how someone's story may sound to you, take their story seriously. It has taken courage, trust and vulnerability on the older person's part to tell you what they have been experiencing.
Sometimes what you hear can be really confronting, Lynn, and sometimes the best thing that I can offer clients who are telling me really confronting stories is just my presence and my time, knowing that I can't fix the problem for them, but the most respectful thing that I can do is give them the time to tell me their story.
Exactly, yeah. So active listening is something that we'll talk about further as well. Let the person know that the abuse is not their fault. They do not deserve to be abused because they are needing more help from their family, for example. You do not need to know the right words to say. Just listening to someone actively, meaning that you are paying full attention to what they are saying, lets people know that you care.
And I think a big part of that for myself is not jumping in when there are pauses in conversations. It's a really practical tip, but actually sitting with people through those silences, because it allows them the thinking time to think whether they want to tell you something else, whether they trust you enough, and they're processing themselves. So letting those pauses sit there that are really uncomfortable, but sitting in those silences and letting the person tell their story the way they want to tell the story.
That reminds me, Jess, too, just, when people are crying as well, is just that might make us feel uncomfortable. So it is just sort of allowing them to have that space to, have those emotions come as they need and process that at that time.
Sometimes I feel that the urge is to try and fix the problem for them. And I have to really fight that urge sometimes and acknowledge that the best thing I can do is just kind of sit there quietly and allow them to tell their story.
I think it's quite natural that people want to have like a practical, we want to practically help someone and just, solve that problem for them. And I think, we sort of fall into that ageism stuff as well in that sort of scenario where we just want to fix it for someone. Poor older person, they're experiencing all of this. I've got to sort something out for them. But sometimes the best thing we can do is just take that step back and just, sit in that space and just be where that person is at.
I feel like that's the best way to actually develop a relationship and a connection. And as we know, that it's a connection that is really supportive to an older person, because the stronger that connection, the more comfortable and safe they may feel in telling you their story.
Absolutely, yeah.
And because older people can sometimes be slower talkers, they can have capacity issues, as we've spoken, they can take longer to form their thoughts. It makes us, I think, feel like jumping in even sooner than we would if we were talking to, our partner or our friend. You need to let them have the time that they need to tell the story their way.
That sense of wanting to jump in and fix problems is sometimes more about learning to manage your own impatience around those circumstances and challenging your impatience. Just sitting there and allowing that older person to tell their story in their own time and in their own way.
Let them know that they are not alone and that there are supports available to assist them. Also remind them that they deserve help and support. Some older people sometimes think that their problem is not as bad as someone else, and you get things like, I prefer someone else to get that assistance. But it's about reminding them that your issues are just as valid as someone else's and there is support for you.
Sometimes abuse happens in this relationship where the older person feels they're a burden on their family and friends. So when you do reach out to help them, they feel like they're a burden on you as well, and they might not accept your help, or they might be reluctant to accept it because they just see you as another person they're going to become a burden to. And I think we need to just reassure them, like Lynn said, that they do deserve help and that they're not wasting our time, that they deserve our support.
So you can remind the person that the problem is real and that other people have had similar experiences too. A lot of people feel that they're on their own and that nobody else are experiencing what they have experienced. So it can be sometimes helpful to just, remind them in a nice way, I guess, that people, are not alone and that other people have experienced similar things.
And that speaks to linking people back in with community. I mean, at the moment we're talking about having that conversation, but as a further action, making sure that these people know that they're not alone is linking them up with organisations and services so that they can see and they can actively talk to other people who are going through similar situations.
Also, check if the person is at immediate risk of further harm. If so, try and get some urgent assistance. If you witness violence, report this to police. Otherwise, you can discuss ways in which the person can stay safe in the meantime. For example, you might explore if there's other family that they can stay with in the meantime, or other practical ideas that they might be able to use to maintain their safety. Also acknowledge how the person is feeling. Don't dismiss how someone is feeling. It is valid to them. When disclosing information about abuse, people are vulnerable and may feel a myriad of emotions from scared, ashamed, embarrassed, worried, and sad.
And I'll say a warning, acknowledge how the person is feeling in an honest way. I think there's this corporate speak where you acknowledge how a person is feeling in order to get it out of the way. So they might say, I understand that this is distressing for you, but I need you to be as unemotional as possible, but that's not helping the situation, in which case you're not really acknowledging the feelings at all. You're trying to push them aside. So when Lynn says acknowledge the person's feelings, do it in a way that actually considers how this must be for them and how it's affecting their ability to engage with you.
Don't be discouraged if a person refuses to open up or refuses help initially. just know that you have laid the foundations of trust that may lead them to open up later.
Think about yourself and all of your friends and people in your life. You know, if you have been through something and you're not always ready to talk about it straight away, and you're not always ready to talk about it on the day that someone else is talking to you about it, you've got to put yourself in their shoes some of the time and think, okay, maybe right now they don't want to speak about this or have this conversation or address this as an issue, but you letting them know that you're there, or just leaving a pamphlet or your number, or just calling them back the next day, letting them know that you are there. And if they want to reach out to you, just because they say they're not ready to talk doesn't mean they're never going to be ready to talk.
I feel that like this is a personal one for you, Lynn. So like this must be something you would have experienced as a social worker, where you're available to help, but the person isn't ready yet.
Yeah, that's true. It is something that I've experienced as a social worker. Yes, you know, I've had to think about my practice in a way that I'm sort of saying to myself, I'm laying down these foundations, and every time there's more and more sort of trust, and maybe, you know, we can sort of build on what we can do next time, and what sort of support I might be able to provide, what else they might be able to sort of talk about in the future. But we've got at least, you know, that rapport, that ability to start talking.
So looking at like what could be really a frustrating situation and seeing it as, no, this is just progress. This is a slow progressive step that we're taking, but it's frustrating at the start of it.
Time might be spent with the person exploring the steps that you and they plan to take. For example, you might tell them that you need to speak to your supervisor about their discussions so that you can discuss what supports are available. So you should really, you know, just talk to the person about what they want to do, what their plan is from here, and let them know that you're there to work through it together and take the next steps together.
There's something so comforting about that arrangement in itself, where the older person's able to talk about their problem, talk about what they might want to do, and they've got someone there who's kind of engaging with them, offering support and help, but also just letting the older person make the decisions and take charge. There's something really empowering about that relationship that I just think it's a wonderful thing to be able to do.
Yeah. And I think you can frame it in also when you're sort of doing that, something practically like, what do you think you might need now? What can we sort of do to help the situation? You know, there's a few sort of really gentle ways to be able to let them know that you're still here and can support them, and, you know, how can I assist you from here? I think also one of the things that I've found is just also finishing up with someone. It's not just talking about their plans, it's just talking about how they are at the end of, you know, you've just told me this really big thing. You've just told me something that's been happening, that's been all-encompassing and has been your life for some time, and you haven't told anybody else. You know, how are you feeling now? And just touching base around that. Some people might feel relief, or some people might be feeling distressed, scared. So again, touching base around how are you feeling around this, and trying to leave them in a space that gives them a little bit of comfort and a bit of safety, that you can sort of move forward to executing some more plans and actions around what needs to happen next.
That's a really good reminder, because you go through this process of having this conversation, which can be quite confronting, and it raises up all of these emotions, and rather than it just go, well, that's done, and walk away, you kind of reconnect again and acknowledge, you know, I've dragged these terrible emotions out of you, how are you doing? Comfort them, acknowledge those emotions again, and kind of end it on a good note without leaving them feeling raw and exposed.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think sometimes as a lawyer, I forget to do that last step, because I'm like, identified the problem, identified how we might help, full stop, okay, we're done. And I forget that this is so deeply emotional. We might need to touch base at the end and maybe have a hug, have a cry. We've got to acknowledge what we just went through.
Yeah.
Not during COVID, though.
And you might be the first person that they've talked to about this, so we need to be mindful of that, and especially everybody out there who are in the community, who are that first point of call. But then also just reminding you guys to look after yourself after that. Have a chat with your supervisor, somebody who you trust, somebody who you can talk to around these issues of what you're hearing, because the information around elder abuse is quite provocative and might raise up issues of experiences that you might have had in your own lives or things that you might have heard from other loved ones. So it can sort of trigger things in us as well. So we've got to look after ourselves.
Just hearing you speak, Lynn, and then hearing Tanya's comments too, it just kind of reminds me how important it is to have a social worker in this team and how much we can learn from each other, because typically our lawyers' mode of communication can be a very different style. It's a style that can be improved upon a lot in working with older clients in these complex situations, and having a social worker in our team really expands our capacity to meet all of our clients' needs. And just hearing you talk about the different way you kind of relate to clients, it just builds my capacity as a lawyer to be able to, in an improved way with these clients.
Thanks for that. We just wanted to cover off some of the things that we recommend you avoid when having these conversations. We're not going to spend too long on this because we think you are going to have great conversations with people, but just to reiterate, what should they not be doing when having these conversations, Lynn?
Yeah, I guess some things that, as professionals you would probably know anyway, but just recap the main sort of points. So avoiding that judgment of the person who might be perpetrator of elder abuse. I think that we have to remember that there's some complicated family dynamics at work here. And the elder person would still have a lot of connection and love and support for the perpetrator in this picture. So just, avoiding judgment around the whole situation, I guess, is helpful. Definitely avoiding that confrontation. That's about self-care as well as ensuring safety for both your client and yourself. So really do not confront an alleged abuser at all. Avoid blame. Person's already feeling a lot of guilt probably and self-blame around the situation.
Questions like, oh, why did you put up with that then? Or, oh, what did you let that happen? How did that work for you? How did that come about? Questions like that aren't going to encourage that person to tell you any further details about their story.
That's right. It really does put a hold on that therapeutic and that relationship of caring and building that trust. Avoid giving advice. I guess, again, we're looking at those basics, sort of being able to listen to someone's story. So, and we want to be able to work with the person as to what they'd like to see happen. So it's about stepping back and avoiding telling someone what you think they need to do in this situation. It's more about asking them what they need. Avoid pressure. So, putting any pressure on the person to make a decision now, immediately about their situation. People need time, especially after they've told you their story, especially if it's the first time they've ever told anybody. So, take a step back and don't pressure the person to think about what they need to do next.
So just to wrap up, Lynn, what would be your top tips, I guess, about what to do if you suspect abuse?
Yeah, okay, so again, as we discussed and have been discussing throughout these slides, is about getting to know the signs that indicate abuse. Obviously, knowledge is power, knowing the signs, and it helps with the feelings of those gut feelings that we might get that there's something wrong. At least you can sort of name some of those things and be able to, put a name to those and understand better and sort of move on from there.
So in part 2 of this series, we talked about what some of the signs of abuse might be. And then in part 3, we did some case studies where we kind of tried to identify those red flags. So if you want, you can go back and have a review of those. And it's signs like those that we're asking you just to keep an eye out for.
Ask questions and gather information. Just keep that open mind, being able to ask those open questions again, getting as much information as you can, building those relationships of trust to be able to get there. Provide emotional support. Just let the person know that you're there and you're walking this journey with them. Checking in with them So just check in, again, as we talked about the emotional aspect, where they are at. They've just told you their story. Check in about what's happening, what sort of the emotions that are coming up. If someone's crying, you can also ask, what are the tears from, what's happening there for you? So it's little things like that help the person that you're talking to know that you're there with them.
And sometimes we forget because you talk with them and then you go away with this plan. You might be thinking, I'm going to talk to my manager. We're going to find out about this system. We might link them in with this service. But you haven't told them, and they might be sitting there thinking, I've said all of this and nothing's happening, then they've just left me. So sometimes just checking in with them to let them know you're still there, you're still wanting to help them, and you're looking into things. Or you just might let them know where you're at as well, so they don't feel like you've deserted them.
Yeah, and doing that, I guess, safely as well, making sure that they're in a safe space to be able to have those check-ins and conversations. As we talk as well about is, talking to your manager, talking to somebody in your organisation, letting them know the conversations and how they might be able to assist with that.
And sometimes you can be the spark of change. So you might identify something that hasn't been identified before. And as an organisation, you might say, yeah, that's pretty common. We need to have a plan to how we're going to address that. So even though there might not be steps currently in your organisation, it doesn't mean that you can't suggest it or just bring it up.
You can be a powerful advocate for your client, and we would really encourage you to speak up if you see something, to speak up if you feel something's not right, and have those difficult conversations, get some support, and link your client or your patient in with other services that can support them.
Take those steps to make sure that the older person is safe. Again, if they're in immediate risk, talking to police and making the reports that you need to, but then talking to the older person around how else they can sort of maintain their safety.
And the last point there is to write it down, and that's about making a record of what you've seen, what you've heard, and especially about what actions you're going to take and what you're going to do and what timeframes, so that you've got something to work to as well.
Great. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. So that's the end of part 4, having the conversations. We have one more part to go, which draws everything together, gives you some tips about ways to support your clients in their life in general to be more connected with community. And it also tells you a bit more about our service and some great places to refer clients to and to find some resources. So as always, if you'd like to contact us at the Elder Abuse Service, you can send us an email or call us. And again, if you or anyone you know is suffering from elder abuse, then please call 1-800-ELDER-HELP, 1-800-353-374, or get in contact with us.